Welcome back to France 24. Time for the international press review now with Florence. Florence, riots in London obviously making the headlines around the world today. Lots of papers trying to understand how this all came about, right?
Absolutely. Now, first of all, let's take a look at the cover of The Guardian, The Battle for London, and there you see it, riots on the streets of Hackney. There's an interesting piece in The Guardian by Stafford Scott, who's a consultant on racial equality and community engagement, and he says that he is appalled by the rioting, but if this comes as a surprise for people, they haven't been paying attention. He says that there's signs, these signs of deep problems within the youth have been simmering, and he tries to provide insight into the mindset of somebody who's willing to smash up their own neighborhood. And he says that young people behave this way when they feel like they have no stake in the neighborhood or no stake in society as a whole. And he says he blames government cuts and youth unemployment, and this could explain why things exploded on Saturday. But he also says that there have been warning signs for a long time that have been ignored as what he calls a black problem. And he attacks what he calls institutional racism within the Met and a difference in treatment for the black community.
Well, you mentioned there the allegations of racism within the Met, and there's an interesting piece in The Independent today, isn't there, about that very topic?
Yes, it's an interesting piece by Brian Paddock, who is a former Deputy Assistant Commissioner for the Metropolitan Police, and he's actually the Liberal Democrats' candidate for the London mayor election. He was a surgeon on the streets during the 1981 Brixton riots, and he says that the black community has a reason to be suspicious because you are 7 times more likely to be stopped and searched if you're black than if you're white. And he says that it's important for the police to show that they're not fighting against the interests of the community, that they're actually for the community, and if they don't, then they'll become the focus of the community hatred.
Gosh, 7 times more likely. It's quite a shocking statistic, isn't it? Well, The Independent also tries to understand how things actually managed to get so out of hand, didn't they? This time doing a bit of social psychology.
That's right. Now, they talked to Clifford Stott, who's a social psychologist, and he tries to understand how a peaceful demonstration can escalate into such a into rioting. And so he says that according to, if you look at what politicians have been saying, they're calling it mindless criminality. But if you look at crowd psychology, there's nothing irrational about smashing up one's community. What's important, though, is to look at the situation in which it occurs. It's important to see the symbols that are being attacked. Now, for instance, he says that in this case, a lot of high-end shops are being looted. A lot of people are stealing things that are becoming unobtainable in this age of austerity. Now, he's not trying to apologize for the rioting. He's just trying to understand why it's happening so that you can prevent it in the future.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, I guess the market crisis is also making some of the headlines. What have they been saying in the international papers about that?
Well, we're actually going to mainly take a look at the front pages of papers. It's interesting to see the photos that people have been, the front pages have been using. You see a lot of stockbrokers holding their heads in despair. We'll take a look at the International Herald Tribune there. You see a stockbroker in Frankfurt, the Wall Street Journal as well. The headlines, stocks plunge around the world. The Washington Post says it's the worst day for markets since 2008. And The Independent actually has a nice little roundup of photos. They call it crash positions. There you see a stockbroker holding his head. Too much to bear, it says, a stressful day for markets across the world.
Absolutely. Probably not going to get much better today either. And Syria is getting a bit of attention in the international press, mainly because of the rift between King Abdullah from Saudi Arabia.
That's right. Now, the Figaro, the French newspaper, has its editorial is on this issue. It says Syria is a regional linchpin, and it looks at the fact that 5 months into what it's calling a civil war, the rest of the region is starting to take positions. And so we see Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Bahrain have declared themselves opposed to the Bashar al-Assad's regime. Now, according to this article, this is a huge change for the region, especially coming from countries that are not so prone to human rights. Now, according to this article, Saudi Arabia is basically trying to make a bet on the region. They're betting on a paradigm shift, and they're hoping to weaken the Syria-Iran alliance.
Okay, Florence, interesting stories from the international press today. Thanks for joining us. Do stay tuned. We'll have more news coming up on France 24 very shortly.